Thanks very much, Maria, for the presentation, and thanks very much, Gloria. So I'm Rachel Palmen, and I'm here to really talk about intersectionality in a project that we're carrying out. It's the Inspire project, and it's really to create a European Centre of Excellence on inclusive gender equality in research and innovation. So I'll speak a little bit about the project and then speak a little bit about intersectionality in research and innovation and how we're operationalising this in the project. So first, to give a little bit of background, the EU policy framework has really sort of shifted from a focus on gender equality to something that they call inclusive gender equality. So for many years in the field of research and innovation, the European Commission financed many structural change projects through the FP7 framework programme, through Horizon 2020 and through Horizon Europe. So over 200 different organisations throughout Europe received funding to implement gender equality plans in their organisations. So this was really research performing organisations, universities, as well as research funding organisations. And now, having a gender equality plan is an eligibility criteria. So you need to have a gender equality plan if you're able to receive funding for research from the European Commission. And what has this meant? This has meant that many organisations that before didn't have a gender equality plan, often in Central and Eastern Europe, have now got a gender equality plan. So this has been a real push forward for institutions working with gender equality within Europe. But also, along this long line and this long trajectory of pushing for gender equality within Europe, more recently, there's been a push for the Union of Equality. And here we can see that in 2020 and 2021, the European Commission adopted 5 different strategies to create the conditions for everybody to live, thrive and lead, regardless of differences based on gender, racial or ethnic origin, religion, belief, disability, age or sexual orientation. So they developed the LGBTIQ equality strategy, they've produced another gender equality strategy, they've also developed the strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities, as well as the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan. They also developed the EU Roma Strategic Framework for Equality, Inclusion and Participation. So this big shift has meant that, for example, the focus on gender equality in research and innovation is now inclusive gender equality. Now, this is really important because in a lot of the Anglo-Saxon speaking world, we talk about equality, diversity and inclusion. And for the European Commission, it was really, really important that gender stayed within this concept. So they're pushing for this idea of inclusive gender equality as opposed to equality, diversity and inclusion. So I'll speak a little bit about the work that we're doing in Inspire and how we understand inclusive gender equality and gender equality plans from an intersectional perspective, because this is a big unknown. So within this project, this was a project it's a research and innovation action. This is really important because the main aim of the project is to really carry out empirical research and push forward the evidence base for inclusive gender equality within Europe. It's a €5 million project, and the project started on the 1st of October in 2022, and it will finish on the 30th of September 2026. So we're roughly halfway in the project. And the main objective of the project is to establish a world-class European Centre of Excellence to really streamline access to knowledge as well as expertise through research and innovation throughout the whole European research area, and as well as providing thought leadership and direction in the design, in the implementation, as well as the evaluation of inclusive gender equality plans from an intersectional perspective. So at the moment, there's a big unknown. What is an inclusive gender equality plan? And how do you develop a gender equality plan from an intersectional perspective? And in terms of outcome, what are we trying to achieve with Inspire? Well, it's not only about just advancing knowledge, it's also got different other aspects. So we also want to advance policy as well as practice. So advancing knowledge, policy and practice on inclusive gender equality in research and innovation in institutions in Europe with an intersectional perspective. But not only does it aim to do this, but it also aims to reduce the different disparities within the member states throughout the era by being inclusive. So really there's been lots of research that's done that shows that different countries, different national policy frameworks within Europe are more active in terms of gender equality or less active. So it really wants to try and tackle this as well. So we're a consortium of 14 different members. 10 of our consortium partners are from Europe. We're also very lucky to have Flaxo from Argentina in our consortium. And in terms of methodology, so I spoke a little bit about how we want to really push forward the knowledge base. So in terms of the big unknown, so we want to really develop the evidence base on integrating an intersectional perspective and gender equality plans in research and innovation. But also how we've structured this project. We've got various different empirical research activities. We're mapping the prevalence, the implementation and the impact of gender equality plans throughout Europe. And we're also carrying out lots of different case studies. Specifically, Aram will present one of the case studies looking at integrating a more intersectional perspective in terms of research and innovation organisations. But we're also, not only are we carrying out empirical research, but we're also trying to provide support to different organisations who are working together to really push forward the change process. So we've got 12 different communities of practice linked to our project, and we've got roughly 90 organisations that are working together in different thematic areas. So this is really where practitioners come together to share their knowledge of designing, implementing and evaluating the change process within their own institutions. So we have this distributed approach to knowledge production and support. We identified 4 main thematic areas in Inspire. So we were talking about sustaining change. So if you have an institution that's pushing forward a change process and, for example, the top management change, how can you really go and sustain change? This is one of the issues that's been really relevant for gender equality plans, for the implementation of gender equality plans. So this is one of our knowledge and support hubs. We also have another knowledge and support hub which is looking at widening participation. And this is where we really look at how can you start an institutional change process but based on local contextual knowledge as well as local feminist struggles. So the people who are really pushing forward change within that locality. We have another knowledge and support hub, which is the intersectionality knowledge and support hub, where I'll be sharing a little bit more of the work that they've done in this seminar. And we have the Inspire Innovation Knowledge and Support Hub. And in this Knowledge and Support Hub, what we're really trying to do is look at how all of this fits into the private sector. And also we want to look at how to develop inclusive gendered innovations. So you can see here how the different knowledge and support hubs are structured. We have two consortium members in each of the different knowledge and support hubs. And then we also have 4 experts who are linked to each of these different knowledge and support hubs so that we can build bridges with different experts throughout Europe and beyond who are outside of the consortium. And then you can see we have these 3 different communities of practice linked to each of these knowledge and support hubs. So I'll speak very briefly about the European Commission's, how they've done some research looking at the impact of gender equality plans, and they've developed an intersectionality policy brief. I think this is quite interesting because they said, you know, they recognise that the European Commission has committed to supporting the development of inclusive gaps to advance gender equality, non-discrimination inclusion of all individuals within higher education and research and innovation organisations. They also recognise that the number of actions across the member states that address other characteristics beyond gender and intersecting inequalities is quite small but is growing. And they also say that at the institutional level, intersectional approaches are very much in the initial stages of development. So they're not widespread yet among research organisations. And they also identify the several key challenges for implementing inclusive gender equality policies due to a range of different interacting factors. Really, the data gathering is always an issue with the legal framework in terms of data protection that's often used as a way of saying we can't take forward an intersectional perspective in this work. So that's one of the challenges that is always flagged. But the report or the policy brief does recognise that several actions can be taken by both EU and national level policymakers, as well as research organisations and public bodies. So really this is what we're trying to expand on within Inspire, trying to see what kinds of actions that different research performing organisations are taking. So intersectionality in Inspire. As I said, we've got the intersectionality knowledge and support hub. I'll show you the members that form part of this who are leading this work in a little bit. We also, the intersectionality academic partners of Inspire, they've carried out a scoping literature review, which you can see here. This is on the website. We also carried out an intersectionality knowledge exchange event in Vienna at the end of September. I'll speak a little bit about the keynote that Patricia Zanoni, because I think it was very, very useful because it addressed a little bit what Maria was talking about earlier, saying about, it's very easy if you look at the academic work in intersectionality, the very theoretical work, well, what can we do? It's too complex, we can't do anything. We can really see this kind of mentality in the in often the field of trying to implement gender equality plans from an intersectional perspective. So we really wanted to have an event where we showcase the work that actually was going on, where you can see the different traces of intersectionality that's being operationalized. So we're also carrying out within the project, we're carrying out 10 different EDI case studies and intersectionality case studies. So where this really tries to capture these kind of traces of work and really sort of policies that are trying to push forward more equal research and innovation organisations. So here you can see who are Intersectionality Knowledge and Support Hub, who forms part of this. These are our two consortium partners. So we have Notus here, which is Maria Caprile, Lorena Sanchez and Dalia, as well as Ken von Leer, Joanna Beacons and Patricia Zanoni from the University of Hasselt. So we have our implementing partners and we have our academic partners. Linked to this knowledge and support hub, we have these three different communities of practice. So we have the Open EU COP, which is led by the Open University of Catalonia. We also have the WISE COP and the Intersectionality for Change community of practice. And we also have 4 different experts who are linked to this intersectionality knowledge and support hub. So we have Ashley Christopherson. She's done lots of work looking at how to take forward an intersectional approach in higher education policies. We have Barbara Di Michele. She's done lots of work on equality and diversity. Bruno Pereira, who's worked a lot on the Supera project and different sexual harassment projects at the European level, and Irina Lungo. So, going back to the knowledge exchange event, because I think this was really useful because we tried to push forward knowledge on what is actually happening in terms of implementing different approaches within the European higher education and research sector. So Patricia Zanoni, she spoke about from how do we move from the concept to think about a repertoire of actions. And what we tried to do in this knowledge exchange event was to really provide space for people to think, to speak about the experience that they'd had in pushing forward, taking an intersectional approach for more equality in higher education and research, as well as providing a space where people could speak about how they successfully counteracted resistances in this space, because we all know there are always a lot of resistances when we try to take a new approach to gender equality. So what were the main takeaways? I think what Patricia spoke about, how we need to have a definition that is systemic, yet a minimal definition as well. So we can't really have this idea of intersectionality as this concept that's up here where no kind of policy approach can really implement it. She also spoke about this idea of the distinction between a concept and an action. It's one thing to diagnose a problem, and it's something completely different to try and remedy it. This is really important when we think about the academic work that's been carried out in intersectionality and then developing a public policy response to try and push forward a more equal research and innovation system. So I think it was very good that she said that we need to think about intersectional policy. We've got to think about it in terms of a matter of degree, so not in terms of pass and fail. Because if we look for the ideal intersectional policy in higher education or research and innovation, we will never find it. So let's focus on traces of intersectionality and then produce knowledge on what is working and how it's working and in what context. So intersectionality is a political strategy as really as a means to try and achieve equality through a repertoire of actions. This was seen as really the way forward for us to try and go forward with the research and also with supporting the different organisations that are going through the change process. Oh. So here we've got the definition that Patricia was using that I think really speaks to us. So intersectionality is a paradigm, a theory, a methodology, an analytical or critical tool that really focuses on this interlocking systems of oppression and privilege and power relations and social inequalities that occur along multiple axes, but including but not limited to gender, ethnicity and race, and social economic status, sexual orientation, disability and age. And in terms of from theory to policy and practice, what we found very useful is this article by Hankinski in 2014, where she looks at developing this intersectionality-based policy analysis. We found this quite a useful framework in order to operationalise intersectionality into policy, because it really provides an innovative structure for critical policy analysis. It also captures the different dimensions of policy contexts, so the history, the politics, the everyday lived experiences, diverse knowledges, and intersecting social locations. And it also generates transformative insights, knowledges, and policy solutions and actions. So for us, it's quite a good mid-level kind of way of thinking about how to operationalise intersectionality. So she talks about different questions, these descriptive questions. So what knowledge, values, and experiences do you bring to the area of policy analysis? What is the policy problem under consideration? How have representations of the problem come about? How are groups differently affected by the representation of the problem? And what are the current policy responses to the problem? And she also asks these transformative questions. So what inequalities actually exist in relation to the problem that you're looking at? Where and how can interventions be made to improve the problem? I mean, this is really what we're trying to do in the field of research and innovation throughout Europe. What's feasible in the short, the medium, and the long term? And how will proposed policy responses really reduce inequalities? This is the real crux of the issue. And then how will implementation and uptake be assured? And how will you know if inequalities have been reduced? So for us, this is a very useful framework that helps us bridge the academic with the policy field. So going back to the knowledge exchange event that we carried out in Vienna, we we had a panel discussion where we invited 8 different panel members from all over Europe. Maria Oliveira was there in the panel representing the Open University of Catalonia and what they're doing in terms of gender equality, EDI, inclusive gender equality. And what we tried to do was we asked each panel member to think about any policy or practice that they've been involved with, which has really successfully made a research and innovation or a higher education institution more intersectional. And then we also asked them, can you think of initiatives that's been effective to really counteract the resistance that you've faced? And I think Udi, who was on the panel discussion, she provided some really good examples. So the first example she provided was she's a Vice Chancellor, she's head of the EDI, the Centre for Inclusion and Diversity in the University of Bradford. And she provided a really good example where she called a meeting of top management with the student council. And she said that the top management had to listen to the different problems that the student council were bringing to that space. So she tried to create this area where people with decision-making power could listen to people from underrepresented groups. She also spoke about effectively tackling resistance. She said, for example, that she was doing an exercise within her university where she went round and she asked everyone to write post-it notes about how they felt in different spaces. And there was somebody there who thought that this idea was ridiculous, so he went round taking off and sabotaging the work. So she called him into the office and she spoke to him about his experiences. And through the discussion with her, he realised his place of privilege within the university, and he actually became the champion of equality, diversity, and inclusion issues within the university. So I think that was a really, really great example to show how you can really, engaging with dialogue, try and counter this resistance. Yeah, I'd say to you, go onto her website, because I think it's really great. She's got a video, explains a little bit about the work that they carry out. And also there are different examples of intersectional traces in higher education and research and innovation. You're going to hear a little bit later about what's happening here, and also Aran's going to speak a little bit about some of the case studies that he's been involved with through the Inspire project. But for example, in the US, through the Advanced program, they had a program for underrepresented minority women in STEM, which focused on women of diverse characteristics and backgrounds, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, disability, status, and sexual orientation. And they had a mentoring and coaching program where they tried to enhance the professional visibility of minoritized scholars. They found that this was a very effective intervention targeting women of colour, which combined mentees with internal and external mentors. And they found that this was a very useful intervention. Again, the University of Bradford, they identified that in their performance assessment in accessing higher education, they realised that the progression rates for Asian females were the lowest of any group within the university. So identifying that has made them be able to carry out interventions to try and tackle that. And then in terms of, this is just a slight reflection from Armstrong and Jovanovic, who say that really the specific opportunities and challenges presented by a feminist intersectional approach to supporting underrepresented minority women through the institutional transformation process. So there are examples, and we're collecting more examples through the empirical work that we're carrying out. So this was just a quick summary of what we're trying to do in Inspire from the point of view of intersectionality.
Gracias, Rachel. ¿Y alguna sugerencia o alguna pregunta que tengáis? ¿Alguna duda? Ah, bueno, podéis preguntar en castellano, por supuesto, en catalán o en... ¿Vale? O en English, as you prefer.
Català.
O sigui, gràcies, Rachel, perquè a més és un projecte com molt ambiciós. I llavors, dues preguntes. La primera, no? Si realment voleu en el projecte europeu acabar tenint una definició d'interseccionalitat aplicada en l'àmbit de les institucions d'educació superior i de recerca. I després, si creus que la Comissió Europea, de la mateixa manera que en l'Horizon ens demana l'obligatorietat de plans d'igualtat, ens acabarà d'aquí poc demanant plans d'igualtat de gènere inclusius, amb el que això vol dir que entenc que sereu vosaltres qui desenvolupareu aquest què vol dir. Jo crec que això és un tema que ens interessa a moltes persones que estem aquí a la sala.
Vale, muchas gracias, María. Bueno, primero yo creo que esto de la definición de interseccionalidad, pues hemos, durante el proyecto ha habido mucho demanda, ¿no? Para que nosotros tenemos como algo en la página web, por ejemplo, que tiene como los conceptos claves. Entonces, ahora mismo estamos trabajando en esto para tener como un glossary de los conceptos claves para que realmente toda la gente que estamos trabajando en esto, pues por lo menos estamos hablando el mismo, cuando hablamos, ¿no?, de diversidad, cuando hablamos de igualdad, cuando hablamos de interseccionalidad. Hay una mezcla brutal que si María ha dicho, ¿no?, que muchas veces se utiliza como diversidad cuando realmente... cuando están pensando en, bueno, utiliza la palabra diversidad cuando están pensando en otras cosas o utiliza esto como sinónimo para interseccionalidad. Entonces estamos ahora trabajando como un glossary, ¿no?, para poner en la página web para que por lo menos tenemos el mismo vocabulario, mismos conceptos cuando estamos hablando de qué queremos decir cuando estamos diciendo inclusive gender equality plan from an intersectional perspective. Hasta ahora nosotros estamos pensando más en inclusividad en términos de un proceso participativo. Y después, pues esto, desde el punto de vista de interseccionalidad, pues esto es como el parte más sustantivo para cómo diseñas el plan de igualdad, y qué tipos de intervenciones puedes diseñar y todo esto. Entonces estamos ahora con el glossary para esto, pero la idea sería que cuando lo terminamos en España tenemos, por ejemplo, muchos ejemplos, muchos estudios de casos de lo que está pasando por Europa y más allá, porque hay muchas cosas muy interesantes en lo que está pasando en América Latina, por ejemplo. Entonces, así, por lo menos, a lo mejor no tendremos como un ejemplo, un modelo de cómo lo aplicas esto, pero por lo menos tenemos un poco recogido más sistemáticamente lo que están haciendo. Y las cosas que realmente puede ser útil para otras instituciones. Y la segunda cosa es, bueno, esto no sabemos, ¿no?, porque depende de cómo quieren desarrollar el marco legislativo la Comisión Europea. Entonces ha habido mucho push, ¿no?, para el Union of Equality, a ver qué pasa. Nosotros, pues... esperemos que este va a seguir, ¿no?, seguir como una línea fuerte, pero no sabemos. Pero gracias por las preguntas.
Venga, Aran.
Jo per añadir, per afegir això que acaba de dir Rachel, dues coses. Primer, que el projecte Inspire el que té, jo que vinc del món de l'antropologia, que és com treball de camp, tot qualitatiu, és que té com 3 dimensions simultànies que són molt importants, no? La dimensió d'anàlisi del que ja s'ha dit, que això és el primer que es va fer. Després la dimensió de desenvolupament empíric, d'investigació empírica, però no només investigació empírica, sinó que hi ha una part qualitativa i una part quantitativa molt forta també, no? O sigui, d'eines per desenvolupar com mesurar aquestes desigualtats, com mesurar el que s'està fent, el que no es deixa fer. I per últim, que és potser el més innovador en aquest tipus de projecte, és la part pràctica, no? Que són les comunitats de pràctica que d'alguna forma creen o configuren el coneixement des de baix cap amunt i després, òbviament, lo interessant és posar-ho tot en coordinació i en joc, que és lo difícil, però és el que s'intenta al projecte. I després, respecte a lo de si ens demanaran fer plans inclusius, també hem de pensar que la Unió Europea d'ara no és la mateixa que quan nosaltres vam començar amb Espai. Ara la Unió Europea és molt diferent, no? I és precisament el que crea més incògnites en el futur.
Sí, hay una pregunta.
Hola, jo soc Núria Benítez de Cerca. A veure, jo et volia preguntar, el meu interès no anava tant cap a les organitzacions, diguéssim, sinó cap a la recerca mateixa. Llavors, ara mateix en molts projectes de recerca ens estan demanant que tinguem una perspectiva de gènere. La perspectiva de gènere en segons quines disciplines és una entelèquia, no? Però, en canvi, si pensem una perspectiva de gènere inclusiva amb les interseccionalitats, deixa de ser tan entelèquia perquè entren en joc moltes altres àmbits, no? Com la ubicació geogràfica o moltes altres parts de les persones que poden ser objecte de la recerca o destinataris de la recerca o utilitzadores dels resultats de la recerca o el que sigui. Llavors, esteu pensant també en això, en com virar de la perspectiva de gènere a una perspectiva inclusiva de gènere en qualsevol projecte de recerca?
Sí, perdón. Sí, eso es una muy buena pregunta. Lo que nosotros, por ejemplo, ahora estamos llamando Inclusive Gendered Innovations, ¿no? Entonces, esto, toda la base que han hecho en Stanford con Londa Scheibiger en Gendered Innovations, ¿no? Yo creo que esto es una muy buena base para empezar a introducir la perspectiva de género dentro de los contenidos en muchas diferentes disciplinas, porque ahí en la página web de Gendered Innovations hay muchas diferentes disciplinas, muchos diferentes estudios de casos, y también tiene, por ejemplo, un parte que habla de interseccionalidad, cómo puedes empezar a pensar en cómo se puede ser como más inclusiva con la innovación. Y yo creo que hay mucho trabajo que hacer para esto ahora. Esto es donde hay mucha gracia en esta parte. Yo creo que también para la inteligencia artificial, porque ha habido muchos estudios, ¿no? Que dicen, por ejemplo, todas estas tecnologías de facial recognition, pues falla mucho más en personas negras, por ejemplo. Entonces, también cómo esto se puede combinar con una perspectiva de género también. Entonces, yo creo que la clave para todo este trabajo es como no hay un lugar donde hay toda esta información. Entonces, cualquier disciplina o tema de investigación hay que ir rascando, buscando. Pues esto qué significa para diferentes tipos de personas, no sé qué, qué investigación ha hecho sobre esto, qué discriminaciones tiene este pensamiento, y hay que ir caso por caso y construyendo este conocimiento. Pero es ahí donde hay la gracia un poco, ¿no? Es la creatividad de mirar qué ha hecho, por ejemplo, en Gendered Innovations, cómo este se puede aplicar o pensar un poco para cómo este es aplicable a otros diferentes tipos de personas. Por ejemplo, había uno de facial recognition y gente que llevan, por ejemplo, diferentes tipos de cosméticos, ¿no? Claro, como esto influye, entonces yo creo que es muy interesante esto, pero hay que ir caso por caso, y a lo mejor la manera de hacer esto más eficaz es gente que tiene conocimiento de la disciplina, trabajando con expertos en género, trabajando con expertos en interseccionalidad, y a ver, pues, entre este diálogo con diferentes conocimientos, ¿no?, que se puede ir desarrollando algo muy sólido de cómo realmente se puede intentar producir como innovaciones más inclusivas.
¿Alguna cuestión más por allí? Isaiah.
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask, what do you think are the consequences of talking about access into those neutral terms like gender, race, age in institutional environments, and rather to go back to the idea of matrix of oppressions and the difference that makes to talk about racism, patriarchy, sexism, heteronormativity, imperialism, capitalism. So to what extent this translation into neutral terms like gender or race, etc., 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 does actually make a translation into nothing in institutional environments, and how scary it is to actually put forward these other political terms that have to do with really oppressions in those terms.
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at the matrices of oppression, no? Because at the end of the day, if we think about universities, if we think about research institutions, if we think about their history and where they've come from, you know, it's only by acknowledging like the structural nature of the university. You know, it's often developed by white men, middle-class white men. It's only if we think about these structures that we then begin to see how different processes and procedures are then discriminating against different you know, groups of people. I mean, I think we need to do that. And by thinking about in terms of matrices, you're also looking at privileges, because we have to make more apparent privileges. And what does the privilege mean? You know, it means certain people can go into certain spaces in a very confident manner and dominate those spaces. And we need to be able to unpack this and make spaces that are more inclusive and that different people feel that they belong. I don't know if that answered. But we're also operating within the framework of the European Commission. So, you know, it's a fine line.
Okay. Pues si os parece, pasamos ya al descanso, porque si no, ¿vale? Que tenemos ahí un catering para que toméis un café o cualquier cosa, ¿vale? Y luego volvemos, pues, hombre, a las 11:30, pero vamos a tener que volver a menos 20, ¿vale? 10 minutitos más tarde, ¿vale? Gracias.